Hi, this is Zvi from EyeCarePro, and just correcting a little bit of a problem where we cut off the first beginning of this webinar. So here we are re-recording it, and we're going to connect with the proper recording. And here we have Brett Kestenbaum, COO of Covalent Careers, and their goal is to help practices manage their hiring, get the best talent, and with the best staff retention and engagement approaches around to really focus on a strong, powerful practice. And it's a really great complement to what we do at EyeCarePro, which is to improve your online presence, your digital marketing, your patient acquisition. You'll find there's a lot of crossover between how you maintain and build a strong brand and how you develop the best hiring and staffing policies. So without further ado, we've got 5 guaranteed ways to improve hiring, build strong culture, and retain staff for years. Take it away, Brett.
Great, thanks V. And for everybody out there listening, if you take away even one thing from this presentation today, I will be happy. So I'm just going to dive right in. Just a quick disclosure, I'm the co-founder of CovalentCareers.com, a company that provides eye care talent acquisition services. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to look at leadership and fundamentals. We're going to look at hiring. We're going to look at the culture in your practice. And we're going to talk about sense of ownership for your team. And what we're going to do is we're going to compare and contrast what great optometry practices do and what the average optometry practice does. So first I'm going to dive into what great optometry practices do here. So with your leadership fundamentals, where do practices start? So great practices start with their BHAG, which is their big, hairy, audacious goal. And with great practices, they address this BHAG with their teams at least annually. A BHAG, for example, for YouTube was to generate 1 billion hours per day of watch time. They set that goal for themselves in 2012. They thought it would be very incredibly ambitious to try and achieve that goal. And since they set the goal and they had their entire organization working towards it, they came up with incredible ways to achieve that goal, and then they did end up achieving it. But they wouldn't have been able to do it without full alignment of their team and the discipline to continue to focus their energy and their commitments and their communications around achieving this big, hairy, audacious goal. So great practices have mission statements that are brought into action monthly. Great practices focus on their profit per X in monthly discussions. And this profit per X could be profit per patient visit, profit per exam, whatever that number may be. It's actually discussed with the entire team, and it's not something that just the business owner knows. It's not something that just the business owner thinks about. It's actually brought into the conversation with the entire team so that everybody can be aligned into understanding how to either improve this or to maintain it or to change it in some way, shape, or form. Core values, very important, brought into action daily. So ensuring that you have a system of core values and making sure that your team is aligned to those same values that you are. Because if you bring on team members that are not aligned to your same values, you're just going to have issues down the line where you have people acting in specific ways that aren't resonating with the way that you think and the way that you feel and the way that you feel that your practice should be run. So understanding what your core values are, bringing those into action daily, bringing those into communication daily. If you're going to be giving out, let's say, praise, you may want to talk about that praise in conjunction with your core values. So an example of that is, let's say, Betty goes above and beyond and helps Tim in the lab. Even though she's front desk, she helps Tim in the lab with some of the projects that Tim has because he's very busy. And even though if it wasn't Betty's job, you may give public praise in your next meeting. Betty, great job helping Tim in the lab. He was really backlogged. This was a great display of putting team before self. And in there, team before self, that would be one of your core values, which is one of our core values here. So again, that would be something that you just want to refer back to when you are giving that public praise. Brand promises keep everyone on the same page. So your brand promises are what you're promising your clients, your customers, your patients when they come into your practice, and your brand promise may be 100% money back guarantee if you're not satisfied. And that's a brand promise, and you're ensuring that satisfaction is that key terminology that is resonating with your team. So ensuring those patients, those customers are satisfied before they walk out the door. And differentiating activities keep the practice competitive. So really defining who you are, and most important, who you're not. So are you that high quality, high price, high touch point practice where your doctors are spending an hour per patient in your dispensary, you have high-end frames and you see a lower volume of patients and customers per day? Or are you a high volume, low touch point, low cost practice where your value proposition, your differentiating activities and proposition are that you can come to your practice and get a lower cost exam, lower cost frames, but you are doing more examinations per day? Both of them have value in the community, and both of them have value in the world, but it's just deciding and choosing who you are so that you're attracting that client base that would resonate with, same thing, your core values, your brand promises, and the mission that you're trying to achieve with your practice. So documentation of processes are updated when changes are made. So great practices actually have documentation for all of their processes. So the documentation of processes are digitally organized in an online platform like Trainual or Google Docs. If you have processes that are outlined in some sort of handbook or standard operating procedures booklet or something that's actually tangible, that's good too. The big thing with having your documents online is that you can update those processes very easily, as opposed to having to print new binders for your entire staff whenever you need to update those files. You do have them just digitally stored. Your team can access them online, and if you do need to make an update, you can do so very easily. So when you have these processes outlined, your team feels that the processes are smooth and the machine is well oiled. The team has an added sense of confidence for their employer and the practice. So this could look something like this. Maybe in 2019, you had a process where your doctor takes the patient, they bring him out of the exam, they walk the patient to the dispensary, they hand that patient off to the optician, and they really don't describe much to the optician. They just hand them a folder and say, hey, take care of Rob here. He needs glasses and lenses. Versus you update that, you're looking at your profit per, let's call it patient, where you wanted to impact that number. So now you change your process. The doctor is now escorting the patient to the front of the office. And the difference in the process is that when the doctor is communicating with the patient, the doctor is saying something more like, hey, Betty, Betty's the optician. Hey, Betty, I'd like to introduce you to Steve. Steve is going to be getting glasses. What I would recommend for Steve is anti-reflective coating. May want to look at something like a Verilux lens. On the other side, I was actually speaking to Steve about what he enjoys in the chair. You may want to look at 2 pairs of glasses for him because he may need one for driving and what he wants to keep in his car, and also one for just everyday wear. So in this interaction, you have the doctor who is now kind of priming that conversation for the optician and helping that process along. But the big thing here is that you'd have that process documented in some sort of training guide, so that if you bring on new doctors or if you bring on new opticians or whatever it may be, you just have this process. So when you are training these new people, you can do much more streamlined, easy training where they understand exactly how that patient flow is going to go. So great practices, employers has trust for their team. So it's very important that when you create these processes, you provide them to your team, but then you trust them to follow them out. You trust them to make independent decisions within this framework that you have, going back to your core values and your mission, and ensuring that all of their actions and their decision-making are in line with those core values, mission, and then the process that you have in place. And when you do this, the team feels that they are trusted and treated like grown-ups. Team understands that if they cause a problem, it will be addressed immediately in a one-on-one conversation. This is another very critical point with your staff. If you do see something that's going wrong, you need to address it immediately. It's just very important that you have this immediate feedback, because let's say Betty, I don't know, let's say Betty was talking to a patient at the front desk, and they were, they weren't really focused on that patient interaction. They were texting while the patient was asking them a question. If you bring that up to Betty immediately, she'll have context into the feedback that you're providing her. Hey, Betty, look, I noticed that you were texting during the patient interaction there. I'm not sure, what that was about, but we can't have that. We need to ensure 100% patient satisfaction. And when a patient feels like they're being ignored or they're not being listened to when they're at the front desk, it's going to make it very difficult for us to have 100% satisfaction with that person. So right now, you're giving that feedback in the context of the problem. If, however, let's say you saw that problem, you were coming back into the front of the office and you saw Betty texting on the phone and the patient is being ignored, and then you waited a week, you let this kind of boil and you wait a week and you give Betty that feedback, Betty's gonna have no idea what you're talking about. She's not gonna remember that she was on her phone a week ago, and she might get a little bit more defensive in that case because it's not in context of the actual situation. Very important to give that immediate feedback in a one-on-one conversation. And just to clarify, you don't want to give that feedback in front of the patient or in front of your staff or in some sort of group setting. You want to pull Betty aside after you have a moment, and she has a moment to pull Betty aside, and then talk about that interaction immediately in a one-on-one conversation. So with this trust for the team understands that their actions impact the team members and the success of the organization. So remember, you're aligning your goals. Everybody's goals are aligned. You have your big, hairy, audacious goal. You've got your brand promises to your customers. You have your core values. Everything's aligned there. And the team, they understand that each of their actions is going to impact the other members of their team as well. So going back to the example of Betty helping out, I forgot what the other person's name was in the lab, but Tim in the lab. That was great. You have team before self. In the alternate example, where you have team members that are kind of functioning more like individuals than they are functioning as a team, they don't necessarily understand that their actions are impacting the next person in line. So in the interaction with Betty, if Betty's on her phone texting, now you have a disgruntled patient. When they go back into the doctor, they're already starting on a bad foot. So that interaction that Betty has is impacting the work that the doctor is going to have, and actually is impacting your doctor's day, because now the doctor is going to be seeing this disgruntled patient, and now the doctor is going to now have to deal with a person who's primed for kind of a more negative interaction. And so they may be taking an agitated tone with the doctor, and just they're already starting in a place of frustration. So in great practices, each member of the team understands that their actions impacts that next person in line, the next person on their team that's going to pick up the ball and go with it to that next stage. In great practice, have a checklist of what to do instead of what not to do, and they help the team understand what's expected of them. So in practices that are communicating appropriately with their staff, they're focusing on the positives. They have a ensure you're always paying attention to the patient policy versus a do not sit at the desk and text policy. So it's just a difference in framing. It's a similar outcome that you're looking for, but you're framing it in the positive as opposed to in the negative. And when you do this, the team feels enormous trust for their employer, causes a sense of ownership and responsibility within each of the employees, which lead to great results through a positive feedback loop of proactive and disciplined behavior. And everything that we've spoken about up to this point is all about aligning everybody, helping everybody feel a sense of ownership in their own work, helping everybody feel a sense of community with their team, and then ensuring that everybody's working for that common goal and feeling great about the work that they're doing and that that work has purpose. So when it comes to moving this thought along, we need to think about, how are we communicating with our team? What is the management style? And great employers, great practices operate in an idea meritocracy. An idea meritocracy is a system that brings together smart, independent thinkers and has them productively disagree in order to come up with the best possible collective thinking and resolve their disagreements in a believability-weighted way. The team feels valued and important in this system. The team engagement increases because their ideas are brought to fruition, and there are no harmful politics because ideas are discussed openly and honestly. So in an idea meritocracy, what happens is that you bring your team together in meetings to discuss problems that may have come up during the week. And each individual team member is able to put their inputs into that discussion. And then after that discussion's over and all of those opinions are weighed, then whoever is owning the decision is going to actually make a decision on how to move forward. So for example, if you are trying to understand how best to impact a number, like let's say profit per patient, let's look at believability in that. Who would be the most believable parties here? Well, it would be first, the most believable party is first going to be someone who has focused and has concentrated on that throughout their career. So that actually may be the store owner or a store manager who has done this before, or it may even be the optician who is working with these patients all day long. So when you have all of these different parties providing their opinions, you're going to be listening to each of the opinions, but then you're going to be weighting each opinion differently depending on the context of the problem that you're looking to solve. Whoever's the most believable party on that in that topic, you're going to think about the ideas and the opinions that they're providing more heavily than others. You know, there's the old saying, everybody has an opinion. Well, that's true. If you ask anybody for an opinion, they're going to give it to you. But is that a good opinion? Is it a believable opinion? Who knows? So just make sure that you are weighing those opinions and utilizing the ones that are at a higher believability when you're making your decisions. Now, one important point on this again is that the great practices, they don't function as dictatorship, and they don't function as really just like a structure where the owner is just providing directives to the team and is not bringing the input back in and sharing in the decision making. When you do it that way, the team starts to feel more like cogs in a wheel than they do feeling as a part of a collaborative environment where their opinions matter and they have a say in things. Just like as the owner of the practice, you feel a sense of ownership, and that causes you to act differently. It causes you to think through your decisions more, and it causes you to think about the impact of not only the work you are doing, but the work that everybody else is doing. You can instill that same sense of ownership into everybody on your team. Granted, they may not actually own your practice, you still own it, but they feel like they have an impact and they have ownership in the decisions and the way that things are done and the way that they're doing your work and the way that they're doing their work. So idea meritocracy is a way to grow, way to go on that. And a great book to learn about that is called Principles by Ray Dalio. So hiring, before we move on, if you don't have the fundamentals and leadership down, no amount of hiring A players will help you. Your leadership fundamentals, the way that you think about your practice and your mission and your vision and the culture that you're trying to build, number one important thing that you could possibly do. You could bring on great people, but if you don't have that leadership down, you're just going to have a lot of turnover. So make sure before you focus on anything else, first focus on your leadership fundamentals and really getting that whole system of foundational skills and alignment in place first. But when it comes to hiring, great practices understand these points. 86% of optometrists are researching an employer's brand and culture prior to applying for a job. Culture ranks number one for what optometrist job seekers feel is most important about an employer's brand. 95% of optometrists research a brand before choosing to apply for an open position. Independent studies have measured a whopping 9,000 full-time equivalent shortage of ODs. So what does all of this signal? What does all of this research signal? It signals that the brand, the culture, the mission, everything we were just talking about is of most importance to anybody who is coming into your practice. And there's two important points here. The first important point is about retention. When you bring someone in, they're going to be more easily retained. They're going to want to be with you more long-term if they fit into that same cultural system that you have, and if they enjoy the work that they're doing, and if they are aligned with their values of the values of practice. The second part is when you're thinking about talent acquisition, hiring these folks, they need to understand, they need to know about this. So you need to promote it. Just like you market for patients, which Zvi's probably great to talk about the marketing to patients aspect of things with you. So too is important to market to new employees, new team members that you're looking to bring into your practice. These new team members need to understand what your culture is. They need to understand what your mission is. They need to understand what your vision is. The way to do that is by ensuring that you have great reviews on Glassdoor, great reviews on Google, ensuring that you have a page that outlines your culture as it pertains to your staff and as it pertains to working at your practice, as opposed to talking about like, you know, on your website, let's say your forward-facing About Us page. That's a great page too that you can also highlight for people who are looking to join your practice, but you're also going to want to be more specific with those people and talk about what it's actually like to work at your practice, and probably get testimonials from people who have been with you for a very long time about their experience working with you and experience working on their team. So great practice has a deep understanding of ROI on a team member, a deep understanding of hiring difficulty, appropriate spend when posting job platforms, and great practices have employers that work with recruiters, and hiring is a nonstop activity, and they have an annual spend on marketing their employer brand. All of those points that I just went over with you. A lot of times there's no time in the day to do all those things. So having an external recruiter that's helping you source great candidates and screen great candidates for your practices is also an added benefit in ensuring that when you have that hiring need, that you do have a pipeline of candidates that will be able to be in your practice, so that you don't have to sit there with a long period of vacancy, which is always a very, very difficult thing for any practice to deal with, having that vacancy. So it's important to understand your numbers. So how much is a vacancy actually costing you? So we have a hiring calculator on the website that you can use. Just plug in your numbers and you can see how much an actual vacancy is costing you. And the things that you look at there is just your average revenue per patient, average patients per day, your average associate days worked per week, and then your net profit margin on your new associate. And if you take a look at that, you can look at the amount of cost associated with a prolonged vacancy at your practice. The other thing to understand is how difficult it is to hire. And it's not only optometrists in this day and age, but it's opticians and technicians. There's a shortage of skilled workers across the entire eye care industry. And the reason for that is that there has been significant amount of expansion across probably about the last 10 years. You have a lot more patients coming into the industry looking for services, and you also have groups that are expanding. And then the final issue is that you have a lot of optometrists that are retiring and try to transition out of their practice, which decreases the amount of optometrists that there are available and increases the amount of vacancies, the amount of people actually looking for doctors. So it's important to understand how difficult it's actually going to be for you to hire, because when you understand it, then you will take those actions to prepare for your actual situation. A lot of times we like to think of things in terms of our ideal situation, but the more practical way to think about things is within the actual situation. So just having this information and understanding it is critical to success. So with an interview process, great employers have a system for this, and they follow that system for every interview. So the process that you could possibly follow, a really good system, is your screening into a top grading interview, into a skills check interview, and then into reference checks. After the reference checks, you would go into an offer stage, you would do background checks, and then you would bring that person on. But ensuring that you follow this process makes it so that you can both, one, have documentation for it, two, make sure that you are treating every single interview the same, so that you don't put not only like unallowed biases into your system, but also like your cognitive biases and all of the other things when you may want to have someone who thinks like you, or who just resonates more with you just from a general perspective. When you put everybody through a process, though, you'll be able to actually identify the characteristics, the skills, and the traits that are actually going to be good for the job that you're hiring for, the culture that you're looking to have someone come into, and the skills that are needed to complete the job that you are looking to get completed. So making that process the same every single time is critical. The interview process is probing and digs extremely deeply. When someone is top grading interview, for example, and they tell you about something that happened with their past employer, it's very important to say, that's interesting, you know, tell me more about that. Or, you know, really, tell me more. But you just want to just ask that question and probe. And when you do that, you will find that in a lot of interviews with people, you're going to hear some very interesting things that you would not have heard if you didn't probe a little bit deeper in that process. And when you follow this process, you'll be able to hire A players, great players on your team much more consistently than if you do not follow the process. With great practices, just like everything else, the offer process is standardized and fast. You don't want to move too fast with your interview process. You want to ensure that you're following those same steps every time. But when you get to that offer, you want to move quickly and you want to get that offer out. So when you're doing an offer, your offer letter templates are consistent every time. Offers are standardized and are competitive to other local salaries and benefits. The offer process is quick and candidates receive offers quickly and efficiently. And this, again, another thing, I mean, everything I'm saying is incredibly important, but this is one that's probably of the highest importance, because what we see all the time is practices identify a great candidate and then they get busy and it takes them a little bit of time to put that offer out there. And then the practice next door hires that person because they're just made an offer faster. So if you find someone, if you identify someone that you want, make sure that communication is very quick, upfront, honest, get the offer letter out there, and then you are greatly increasing your likelihood of a successful hire. If you need help with salary, there's a salary calculator that looks at aggregated data, and you can filter it by your state and what you're looking for, your practice setting, etc. So after you hire someone, again, everything process, there's an onboarding process to bring that person on. With your onboarding process, there's an onboarding presentation that maybe goes over your culture, your mission, your vision, the history of your company, whatever that may be, just so that you can help this person have a better understanding of who you are, what you're about, and what that experience with your organization and your team members is going to be like. Presentation is motivating and exciting. You want to ensure that this person is excited about the future, excited about coming to work with you and your organization and your practice for the long term. There's a distinct onboarding week or month or however long it takes to get that person up and running. And during that time, it's different than the rest of their career with you. They're focusing more of their time on learning and understanding the role and being able to build that skill set so they can be the best in the world at that specific role that they have at your organization. Within that distinct onboarding process, there are milestones to achieve with progress results. There's a reflection debrief process to handle questions. So within all of this, you just want to make sure that you're providing feedback. You're giving the new team member time to ask you more questions, and you have this feedback loop that's moving forward so that you're understanding that this person is actually progressing with your skills, but you're not forcing a progression that's just going to cause them undue stress. Take a little bit more time in the beginning. They don't need to be fully productive in the beginning. If they're just more satisfied and they're just feeling better about things, it's going to have a better long-term result for you in the end. So now that you have this person on, how are you interacting and engaging? What does communication look like? So great practices, meetings with their teams recur on the same cadence. They're not just ad hoc. Meetings have a clear agenda, meaning you don't just go into a meeting and start talking. There's a specific agenda and reason that you are actually getting into that meeting. Team members participate and engage with one another. Some of these meeting types be your monthly review meeting or your quarterly one-on-ones with a performance review. And then maybe you have a yearly offsite meeting where you have your year in review and you do your next year's plans and you have a little bit of fun with your team just to add that cultural element as well. And then what do you do? What do you do to give back? So giving back, incredibly important. You know, this is very important to people and it's actually just a great thing to do just in general, feels good and helps the community. So great practices have yearly charitable contributions. They make donations and they attend events where people leave the office to give back. Covalent Careers, some of the things we've done here is we've done beach cleanups, we've done food drives, every year we just do many other things that we just are giving back in the community. We have what's called a volunteer off day where we allow any one of our team members to take one day during the year, fully paid, and they can go into the community and do something to make a positive impact in some sort of volunteer fashion. When you do this, team members feel that their job helps them be a better person. And, you know, an added benefit is the practice receives PR. And patient volume increases. And then ultimately, your team members have personal fulfillment due to the fact that their jobs enable them to get involved beyond just patient care. And that goes to what Zvi was talking about with recruitment marketing is very likened to patient marketing, where it's all about your brand and it's all about what everyone thinks about you and your practice. It's not only the patients, it's not only your team, it's everyone. And that's what marketing is. That's what your brand is. It's getting yourself out there, and it's that story. It's the what do people think about you? It's the why do they come and visit you? It's the why do your employees work for you? It's all of that. Marketing is your story. And then when people feel healthy, when they think healthy, they tend to perform better. So either making a reward system for healthy habits or just promoting them, or instead of just talking to people about your organization's goals, talk to them about their personal goals. Help them achieve those personal goals. Maybe someone wants to run a half marathon, or maybe someone wants to go and run a Tough Mudder, or whatever their goals might be. Talk to them about their goals, help them achieve their goals outside of work, and they'll help you achieve your goals inside of your business. Whenever you have those wins at your practice, make sure to celebrate them. So there's, when people go to work, especially nowadays, people want to have fun. People want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. That's why you see your Googles, your Facebooks, your biggest companies in the world. It feels more like a cult culture where people love to be there. And it's not about having, a chef in the office, and it's not about the snacks that you give out. It's really just about that feeling that your staff has in engaging with one another and engaging with you. And so this is important because you're going to be asking these people to perform to their highest degree, and you're asking them that because you want specific results to be achieved. So when they achieve those results and when you achieve those results, there's got to be rewards on the end. And it might not have to be monetary rewards. It might just be great job, great job, Jesse. You did a really great job with the patients this year, and that led us to hit this next goal. Great job, Dr. Smith. You really did a great job talking about anti-reflective coating with a lot of those patients who could use it. And then Tina, excellent work whenever you got that patient handoff, reiterating what Dr. Smith said. It's just that recognition, making sure you're all celebrating those wins together and you're all a part of it because you're a team. Sometimes goals are not hit though. And when those goals are not hit, you need to go through that process of pain. It hurts. It hurts when you don't meet a goal. Internally, we all want to strive to hit those goals. So it hurts when we don't hit them. Then you need to reflect. So that means getting together with your team, just like that issues log meeting. Why didn't we achieve our goals? What were the things that caused us to miss the goal this year? And then progress, set the course. Okay, if we do this, maybe if we change our tactics here, or if we change around our framework, if we change the way we're speaking to patients, or if we can decrease the amount of customer complaints, that'll help us achieve our goals next time. So that reflection is critical. Friendship and culture. So within your office, how do people feel about each other? How do people feel about their experience inside of the workplace? So obviously work comes first, but friendships exist. If you see people talking during the day, you don't have to yell at them every time. If you see that there's a persistent period where people are continuing to talk too much, you see that work's not getting done, or you see that maybe a patient or a customer are being ignored because people are having side conversations, then that goes back to that one-on-one instant feedback, where you need to give that instant feedback. Hey, Jane, Steve, socializing at work is totally acceptable. What's not acceptable is a patient sitting there waiting to be spoken to, and you guys are having some sort of off conversation that's not related to this patient's experience. At lunchtime, it would be great if you guys are talking, or even during the day when you have some downtime, if you're talking and having a good time, that's okay. But again, what I'm focused on here is the fact that you had a patient that was standing in front of you, and you guys were engaged in a conversation and leaving them feeling awkwardly out there. Not only does that impact the way that they feel about the two of you, but it also impacts the way that they feel about our business. So just giving them that feedback. Team has a feeling of family. So, having everybody involved and really everything we spoke about to this point will cultivate that feeling that they're part of something bigger, they're part of something that feels more like a family than it does like a workplace. Team member core values match since you hired based on personality type and core values. So the interview process is critical. You're looking for people that not only can do the work that needs to be done, but also that fit into your culture. If you have people that have different viewpoints, that's great. But if they don't align with really their their core beliefs, then you may run into some issues there. So you want everybody, if you have, like, for example, if you want a high performing real high performance team, and you bring on most people who are like, I love to grow, I want to work, I don't care about overtime, I'm ready to go, it's all about my team, it's all about the results. And then you bring someone on who's more like, I really just I like a 9 to 5. I really, I think work is work, and that's how I treat my career. I really don't have any motivation to advance or anything like that. Nothing wrong with that person or their belief system, but they're probably not going to fit into your culture. And what happens in those circumstances is, if you bring someone on who, let's say you have a high performance culture and they're a low performer, then that's going to cause tension among those high performers, because they're going to be looking at the low performer, and they're going to be kind of frustrated, and then that's going to cause ripple effects. So you really want to, again, you want to take care of hiring the right people, hiring the people that fit into the culture, and that culture needs to be set from the top. Like, what do you believe in, and what are you looking to cultivate at your practice? Cultural events let team members learn more about each other, and this helps the business. So, those happy hours or anything like that where people get to socialize outside of work are very important. Not everybody's going to want to come to those events. Maybe if one day per year, let's say, you close down the office for a paid internal holiday, you can call it your own office holiday. And as opposed to having people socialize outside of work hours, you actually have that event when you may have had a work hour. Now, this is obviously going to cost you revenue for the day or whatever it may be, but you can bring your team together and really cultivate that feeling of family and bonding and appreciation. And what that will lead to is less turnover, meaning that you'll have less costs of turnover, meaning it's likely and so much less costly to just either close your office down for a day or just get people together in some way, shape, or form. But most of the time, you could just do it outside of work hours when people are happy to come to a bowling event or whatever, post-COVID meetups are going to look like in the future. Okay, sense of ownership. So you want to make sure that everything, your metrics, like I was describing before, there's transparency here. So you want to make sure that your metrics are transparent. Everybody can see everything, even your bottom line. At our company, we show people, every single person in our organization, our P&L. Everyone knows exactly how much revenue we generate. Everyone knows exactly how much our expenses are. We are all aligned on understanding what the goals and objectives are to hit specific bottom line numbers. And then with that, we have profit share. So our team is aligned with these numbers because they are a part of them, and they also get to benefit from that. So we have a profit share plan. Our profit share plan here is a formula. It's retention. How long have you been with us? Plus salary. Well, what is your proportion of salary to all of the other proportion of salary? Plus performance. How well did you perform this year? And that's your amount of the profit share pool. So let's say there's $100,000 in the profit share pool, and all of this came out to 3%. Then you would get 3% of that 100,000, which would be 3,000. All of our team members know that this exists and that they are a part of it. So they're all focused on their actions leading to that bottom line. And then that last piece, like I was describing, we base it on an EBITDA percentage. We say, okay, we need to make sure that we're above X percent EBITDA, and we're above, X dollars of EBITDA this year to meet that bonus pool criteria. And then this is totally optional, but sometimes you may want to have a clear path to ownership, and you may want to describe that. If it's in your plans, you do want to describe that to any of the doctors or potentially an optician, depending on where you are, taking ownership of that practice. Okay, so what's the end result for these great practices that do all these great things? Well, their turnover is lower and their retention is higher. The opportunity cost for them is lower because they keep their staff on for longer. Anytime that you have turnover, likely all of you have seen how this feels and what it does to your practice, but it is going to cause significant opportunity costs in terms of revenue, in terms of amount of patients that you can see, in terms of your brand proliferation, all of that. And then obviously these companies have likely lower hiring costs, not necessarily that they spend less on hiring, but their costs of hiring are lower because the majority of the cost of hiring is in your cost of vacancy and your cost of turnover. Okay, so just a couple of quotes here. I'm going to fly through these because we don't have much time left. And again, I do want to give you time to ask some questions. So strength of a team is each individual team member. The strength of each member is the team. So this is a relational problem here. You need both the individual and the team. It's like that movie, A Beautiful Mind with John Nash? Just like that equation. No matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you'll always lose out to a team. You cannot do it all on your own. You need that team and you need them performing at a high caliber. Okay, so I just went through everything that you would see at a great optometry practice. And now I'm just gonna give you the example of a average optometry practice and what that looks like. So the leadership fundamentals. There's really no mission, there's no vision, and there are no core values. So sometimes these organizations have a generic mission statement, the same one that everybody else has. The core values don't exist or they're never mentioned. The mission and values aren't brought into decision-making and they're not brought into meetings. There's no brand promises that they're promising the patients. You know, we guarantee that your lenses are made correct every single time. And if they're not, we'll give you your money back or correct it for you. There's no differentiating activities from the competition. You know, are you the practice that's high value, high price, high touch point? Or are you low cost, low touch point, high volume practice? You know, what is your differentiating factor both internally and externally? And they're not tracking their metrics or sharing their metrics with anyone. Documentation of processes is non-existent, so there is no documentation of processes, and a lot of times the processes look different every single time that people go through them because there's no standardization. Employers have a lack of trust for the employees. So in an average practice, the employees feel like they're being hawked over, meaning the boss is just kind of looking over and seeing, you know, micromanaging everything. Employees are told not to socialize, not to use Facebook, keep their phones in a locker. The trust is non-existent, and the boss feels more like an authoritative figure than they do feel like a leader. And they have a long list of what not to do. Do not use Facebook. Do not text message during work. Do not speak with other coworkers during work hours. You know, there's a whole list of what not to do as opposed to what to do. Do greet the patients that come in with a smile. Do show the patients to the back as opposed to just telling them where the office is, so forth and so on. Employer operates with authoritarian leadership as opposed to operating as an idea meritocracy. So never asking the staff members for their opinions on subjects, never having those meetings, never allowing those employees to have suggestions for different processes. And what all that causes is harmful gossip behind the scenes because people don't feel that same level of trust and understanding that everybody's on the same team. So the average optometry practices fall victim to these specific stats here. Employers rank their #1 headache in practice as staff, yet the practices don't really do much to change this or to address that staff problem. The average employer spends only $826 a year on marketing their employer brand. The same employers rank the importance of their employer brand extremely low at a 6 out of 10, even though the candidates, the job seekers, the people that you're trying to attract, are rating that employer brand as the most important factor for them. So a disconnect there. The average difficulty to find an optometrist was rated at 3.5 out of 10. And again, this is asking employers, but the reality is that an optometrist can find a practice very easily. And a practice, it's very difficult for them to find an optometrist because there's not enough supply of optometrists to meet the demand of jobs out there. 51% of ODs find a job before graduation, and 49% find a job after graduation. That means that if you're looking to hire a new grad, for example, you need to start that job search in February or March, or I should say you need to start that employee search in February or March, because those same graduates that are graduating towards the end of May, they're going to be looking for those jobs starting in February. So the practice that gets out there early is going to be able to hire these new graduates that are coming out. And the majority of job seekers over the course of a year, specifically for optometrists, are the new graduates, because obviously they're going to need a job. So what do average practices do when they are thinking about hiring? Well, they're more reactive instead of proactive. An average practice is going to start the hiring process after they have a turnover, or if they know that someone's leaving in 2 months, they're going to start looking in 2 months once that person leaves. I liken that to, selling your house before you've found another house to live in. Because once you sell your house, now you have to rush to find that next house that you're going to live in, which means that you're not going to have any choice, and you're going to feel that anxiety around that search for a new house. So as opposed to that, you would start that house search looking for that house that you want to buy before maybe you sell the house that you're currently living in, because if you do it backwards, then you're not being proactive, you're being reactive, and it's going to cause more difficulty down the road for you. So how are the interview processes for average practices? Well, they don't really have a process. They do the interviews differently every time. They have different questions that they ask different candidates. Sometimes they have a phone screen. Sometimes they just bring someone in for an in-person interview. Other times they go from phone screen to offer without even seeing the candidate. It lacks consistency, and they're never able to improve upon those processes, and they don't know how to compare one candidate to the other. What we see often is during the offer stage, it takes a long time for practices to present an offer to a candidate that they really like, and then that candidate gets hired by another party. Or if they're going into the offer process, they're not researching what the competitive salary rates in their area are. So they may miss out on that great candidate because the pay scale that they're offering is not in line with what's being offered at other practices in your area. With onboarding, there is no dedicated onboarding. An average practice typically will bring in a new employee, and they will tell them a few things, give them a little bit of training, and then have them, off on their own. But they're not going to talk about the mission of the company, the vision of the company, set up time to eat lunch with all of the other employees just to get used to the new people and to get to know everybody that they're working with. So they don't have that onboarding experience. When it comes to culture, and when it comes to the meetings lack structure. They're always ad hoc, meaning nobody knows when the next meeting's going to be. And then when a meeting comes up, nobody really knows why that meeting's occurring. They may feel anxiety because the doctor scheduled a meeting. And usually when they schedule a meeting, that means that something is wrong. So as opposed to having a nice cadence where everybody knows exactly what that meeting's about, it has structure, it has repetition. These meetings are ad hoc, causes more anxiety within those employees. Business doesn't impact the community. Business doesn't get back. Not going to the schools, doing any of those education, not getting a booth at any of the business fairs that are in town, anything like that. Most practices aren't doing any community give back programs. Average practice doesn't have any reward program for people keeping healthy, and they don't typically talk about the employees' personal goals as well. And the staff doesn't collaborate or celebrate on wins, and they're not rewarded for those wins. There's no team parties. There's no even like kudos system. There's no saying, thank you, you did a great job, you did great work, I appreciate you, none of that. Friendship and culture are limited in a lot of practices. Where relationships start and end at work. People don't really feel that same bond or connection and ask each other to hang out outside of work. Employees lack that feeling of family, and then work is purely a means to an end and a paycheck. In average practices, the business lacks transparency, so there's no performance metrics that are being shown. The practice staff just thinks that the practice owner is incredibly wealthy, and they don't understand things about like the fact that all of that revenue that comes in is used to pay all of the employees and the rent and the bills and to buy that new piece of equipment. And then after all that, the tax man comes and takes, the portion of your money, and then finally at the end of the day, you have your leftover. But they don't understand any of that because you've never discussed it with them. Profit share out of the question. So any profit that comes in is not discussed. Nobody has any idea how much that profit is, and they also know that they're not going to partake in it. So a lot of times they're not going to work that extra mile to try to hit those goals that are set for the practice in the end. If you have ownership, or if a practice, I should say, has the potential for ownership for a doctor, it's not really addressed. It's not spoken about with any of the doctors coming on. It's just something that kind of they have, maybe thinking about in the back of their mind, and there's no transition plan for that other doctor to get to that ownership level. So what are the end results here? Well, hiring is harder because you don't have those great reviews on Glassdoor or on Google or wherever it is. And when people are searching for your brand, they can't really find any information. So they don't know anything about you. So you're going to miss a lot of applicants there because they're just simply not going to apply. Then you have your opportunity costs are increasing, your vacancy costs are increasing because you have more turnover, and then your hiring costs are increasing because of those vacancy costs as well. So when you're thinking about these two different types of practices, just think to yourself, who would you rather work for? And then ask yourself why. And then here's just a little bit of data that we can go through here. So when it comes to pay, over the last 19 years, the average OD starting salary increased 36%. This may seem like a lot, but CPI, which measures inflation, was 2.11% on average, compounding. And if you look at that, that leads to 44% growth in price or in inflation versus only 36% growth in salary. So the average salary 2019 was $99,300 as opposed to where it should have been at $108,547. And when you look at corporate practices are actually roughly keeping up with that CPI and offering about 12.3% higher salaries than private practices, which makes it a lot easier for those corporate practices to attract those doctors because they are, as we will see, very honed in on that salary component and then that culture component as well. So is it important for workplace to have opportunities for socializing with coworkers during the workday? Overwhelmingly, yes. But it's important for workers to have opportunity for socializing after work. 44% yes, with 55.8% no. So just ensuring that your employees don't feel like the whole workday is just work without any ability to speak to each other, and making sure that they can have these relationships, have fun, laugh, and do those things during the day. Percentage of respondents who would not accept a job that required them to work weekends. And as you can see here, all of the newer graduates are more likely to accept jobs where they need to work weekends versus more of the seasoned professionals a lot of times don't want to work those weekend jobs. What's the lowest salary you would set at this point in your career? So as we would expect, the more seasoned doctors are looking for higher pay, and the newer graduates aren't looking for as much pay. Would you accept a job where a 401k retirement plan is not offered? 59.2% say yes, meaning that the 401k plan is not the most important thing for them when considering an opportunity. If you had to choose between getting a salary increase or buying into the practice, which would you choose? 53.9% said salary increase versus 46.1% buying into practice. So even though you may think that if you're selling your practice or you have an opportunity for someone to purchase your practice, there are the majority of doctors don't actually want to own a practice. They'd rather just be employed. So just something to consider because a lot of times, maybe you do want to just bring on that next associate while you're waiting to look for that person who actually may buy out your practice at some point because it may take you a lot of time to find that person. What is the maximum amount of time that you would be willing to commute? This is very important, 41.6 minutes. That means you can expand the geographical region of your search when you're searching for candidates for your position. Was your ideal location for a workplace? suburban, urban, rural. So not that many people in the rural areas as expected. This was a little bit unexpected. We believed that urban would be the highest there, but 64.4% say suburban. Do you plan to stay at your current job for longer than a year? This is a great stat. Most doctors do want to stay at their current practice for longer than a year, so retention will be higher. What is the number one reason that you would prompt you to find a new job? Poor office culture, number one reason. And then the second is pay. And then the third is values. Okay, so what can you do? I want to give you some action items so that you have a little bit of take home here. First thing I'd recommend reading is this book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. Great book about just how to structure, how to set up your business, the different components of your business, your people, your strategy, your execution, and your cash. So you can look at all those different components and set your business up right. Within this book, you'll see a lot of tools. Very, very important tool here is first establishing those core values, your purpose, your brand promise, and then your goals. And then from there, you can create your strategic priorities, your 3 to 5 year plan, your 1 year plan, your quarterly plan. And then these are documents that you do want to share with your team. Documents are very difficult to fill out. They take a very long time, but if you do concentrate that effort on filling them out, it's going to have a huge impact for your practice. Run your practice through the ROI calculator. Understand your metrics. Understand what it means to have a new employee come on, or understand what actually that vacancy is costing you, so you can utilize that information in your decision-making process when you're thinking about what to do next. Run your practice through the ease of hiring tool. Understand how long it may take you to hire on average. Again, remember, it's poker, it's not chess. You want to give yourself the best odds and have the most information going in. Read the book Delivering Happiness. Great book about culture. This is about Zappos.com and how they became a great company by focusing on culture. And this is really helpful if you do see that disconnect between your generation and the millennial generation, if you're not a millennial, and the type of cultures that fit and what millennials really would resonate culture-wise for millennials, but really for I mean, Zappos, great place, especially when you read the book. And then from my team to yours, we wish you nothing but success.
Fantastic.
Happy to take any questions here. I know we just have a few minutes left, but want to be as helpful as I can.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to enter questions into the chat or the Q&A, by all means, I'd love to field those. And that was a fabulous presentation, Brad. Thank you. And I'm really
my pleasure.
It does really, reinforce the crossover between how much your practice culture affects, what potential employees are experiencing in the hiring process while they research you. Once they're in your team, all of that is going to come through to potential patients as well. And they're looking at very similar stuff. So, we just got a question come in. Jennifer's asking, she says she has an associate that's been working for her for the past year and it's working out great. And she mentioned being interested in becoming a partner in the future. She says, which I would love, but not quite yet, as I'm a newer doctor myself, 7 years out. How can I keep her happy with a clear pathway to buying in?
That's a great question. And if it's not in your plan set to have this person buy in, this is a critical piece of information for you, because then again, proactive versus reactive. You understand that there potentially is not a fit between what your goals are and what one of your key employees' goals are. So getting ahead of this is really important. If this is not in your plan set, what I would recommend is having a sit down with this person and really having a heart-to-heart with this employee that's on your team or this doctor who's on your team, and letting them know what your stance on it is, and then hearing out what they actually mean by wanting to become a partner in this future. Is that a necessity, or is that just something that they want because they want to increase their earnings potential? If it's about increasing their earnings potential, then there's different paths and avenues for you. You could talk about bonus plans. You could talk about revenue share. You could talk about those type of things, as opposed to talking about actual ownership in your practice. Or the other part of it is you can talk about a transition plan. So look, give me 2 years and let's create a transition plan for you. where you transition out of working here, and during that time, I'll be looking for a new doctor as well. But here's our plan, or whatever that might be. Just thinking about how you can transition smoothly, getting again proactive, getting ahead of it, versus this person at some point, if you never address this problem with them and say, yeah, we'll talk about that down the line. Then at some point they might either just leave and try to start their own thing without telling you because they want to get paid up until the end, or they might actually find that opportunity, and then same thing may happen where they leave and now you're stuck without a doctor. You have no transition plan. You don't know what you're doing, and now you're starting the hiring process.
Excellent. Any more questions coming in? We have a thank you from Charles. Great presentation. Lots of suggestions, utilize and develop. Well, if nothing else comes in, thanks again, Brett. This has been really, really a lot of fun, and I think a really important topic to present. There's a lot of uncertainty about many of these issues. Yeah, Jennifer's mentioning again that she wants to do everything you're mentioning, but it's all about time. And I think in your defense, Brett, I'll say that sometimes I'm of the opinion that your time as an OD is best spent delivering the best patient care possible, and there's a lot of help out there from companies like yours, Brett, in the hiring process and getting that stuff in place. And on our end, absolutely, to get your online presence where you want it to be, the reviews, the Google search rankings, the website, the campaigns. So, your time is valuable, and you can't possibly do everything. So that's why there are organizations that exist to do those at the best possible level for you. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. We should be releasing a recording of this in just a short while here. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, everyone. Take care.